What's good, guys? Your boy Weez.
And welcome back to
Y'all, we in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. It's your boy's birthday. And so for her birthday, I took her to Whitney's plantation, right? Whitney Plantation?
Uh-huh.
And then, so now it's my birthday, and so let's keep that same energy.
Oh, yeah, because we go.
Everybody like, how you gonna take her to a plantation, a slave plantation for her birthday?
Oh, so you did this.
So I said, no, I just said, no, I want to do anyway, because y'all have been loving our plantation historical vlogs. So I figured, you know what? I normally go to Charleston once a year. It's like my second home. It's several plantations in Charleston. Why not go to one of the biggest ones in Charleston, the most historical one in Charleston? I think it's called McLeod Plantation. So it's me and another slave plantation visit for your boy's birthday. Merged out, put God first.
Always.
Let's see what we can get into. We got Sweet Pea with me. Amani.
Hey, Money, honey.
Say something to people, Amani.
Hey, how you doing?
All right. Sorry, let's go inside. Hello. All right.
So this was our starting point for the tour. It was a lot of historical facts, a lot of gift options. We grabbed a few snacks to prepare for our transitioning to freedom tour. You'll see all the Gullah Geechee culture, Charleston culture, the different Gullah cookbooks, foods, rice, grits, like the different things, seasonings. There were so many different things. And this is also where we purchased our tickets.
All right, so you are here. All right, let's go to the main house first. Let's kick off this tour. First thing we come across, y'all, all these beautiful trees. But you know, the history that probably hung from these trees. Let's start off at the big house. Yo, at the big house, we're at Master's house. Just imagine, Master and Miss Ann was out here just sitting on the outside, chilling, drinking lemonade.
Ninety-5% of cotton in America is called upland, and the cheapest cotton in the world is called Asiatic, comes from India and China. If you ever order anything on Amazon, it'll say 100% cotton, but when you get it, it's thick and
right,
not soft. It's because it's the cheapest.
Probably get from Timu or something.
Yeah, right. But I want you to feel the difference. So this is the cotton. I picked this in Georgia.
Wow.
Okay. And this is what was grown here, so if you can feel the difference.
Wow.
And this has been a little cleaned up a little bit.
This just feels like a lot smoother too.
And they compared it to silk.
Right. So we just found out that when we walked in, is really the back of the house, and this is really the front of the house. Wow. So this is the front of the plantation where the slave master used to sit, and they made the back of the house for theatric purposes. Damn. Yeah, it's a tour right now, man. Yeah, look at this tree. Y'all, I'm walking through grass that slaves probably used to work or play, or look at this, y'all, acres. Can't really see the inside of it. It's an outhouse? Oh, dang, this would be an outhouse. Oh well, this probably where they go fetch that water. It's back here. Now these trees are spooking me out. All right, y'all, so it's like 1:45. There's a guided tour at 2 o'clock. So we got some footage, and we're just gonna wait till 2 o'clock to get the official tour and give y'all a little bit more insight on, you know, the historical things that happened at this plantation, y'all. So it may be all over the place, but no, we didn't know we were gonna stick around for the tour, but we already here and it's free.
We'll make it make sense.
We'll make it make sense, so come with us.
Sites of conscience. And so what that means is that we tell the story of slavery from the perspective of the enslaved. And so some things I say might be hard to hear, hard to digest, or cause a little internal conflict. If that is the case, please take care of you. Feel free to take a minute to meditate and contemplate on what you've heard and how it makes you feel, or you can take a short break away from the group. But in the end, I hope you all stay for the entire tour. The theme of our tour is Transition to Freedom from 1851 till 1990. And with that, we're going to start in the teardrop. Now, we may start outside, but if there's thunder, we do have to go inside of the house. That's not a rule I make, that's a rule for the county. All right, here we are on McLeod Plantation Historic Site. The original plantation was 1,700 acres. We're down to the last 37 acres, and we're in the Oak Alley. At the head of the alley, we have the big house. This would be the space of McLeods. 3 generations of McLeods lived here, and it was a source of constant pain for the enslaved. At the end of the alley, we overlook the burial grounds. This would be the final resting place of the enslaved, their descendants, and the Native Americans. This part of the plantation gives a false romanticized view of what this plantation looked like, because in the days of the enslaved and the McLeods, this part of the plantation would have been the back of the plantation. The columns would not be here, the porch would not be here, this oak alley would not be here. This area was augmented to look like a Grand Southern home and a Grand Southern plantation to take advantage of tourism and what people expected a plantation to look like. So, this area came about in the early 20th century. Now, that's going to bring us closer to the big house. All right, here we are at the big house, and this is where the lives of the enslaved and the McLeods would intersect most often, most intimately, and most unequally. It is here where the humanity of the enslaved was tested, tried, and in most cases denied. And so, through their narratives, through their stories, and through their accounts, we'll see how the enslaved were treated, how they were resistant and resilient, and how they eventually had value ascribed to their lives. And so, that's going to bring us to the narrative of the scullion. The scullion would have been a little boy between 7 and 12 years old, and he was given the most menial of tasks in this building, the kitchen house. One of his daily tasks was to carry food from the kitchen house over here to the big house. And while this is a short distance, he was not trusted to not taint or to not taste the food. And so, while carrying that heavy, hot, lidded pot, the scullion may have had to go on something called a whistle walk. And this just means that he had to whistle from the kitchen house over here to the big house to ensure his enslavers that he was not tainting or tasting the food. Now, his safety concerns were never addressed. What would happen if he fell? What would happen if he dropped the food? What would happen if he burned himself? What would happen if he were actually accused of tainting or tasting the food? We really don't know. The only thing that we're sure of is that his life was monotonous at least 3 times a day. From 7 to 12 years old, he had to carry food from the kitchen house over here to the big house, and he was not trusted to do so. Now, that brings us to the narrative of Charles Rivers. Charles Rivers was a young man who grew up here in the big house. He spent 20 years in the big house, and eventually he became the butler. We don't know much about Charles's day-to-day life, but we are sure of his conception. Charles's conception was the result of a sexual assault on an enslaved woman and an alleged half-brother of the McLeods, John McLeod. And so, his conception brings up a few questions. What was it like to serve your family in this building, but not be accepted by your family? What was it like to serve the family of your mother's assailant? We really don't know. The only thing that we're sure of is that Charles spent 20 years in this building. He was eventually the butler of the big house, and then after the Civil War, he went to downtown Charleston to live with a woman named Harriet Rivers. Harriet Rivers may have been his actual mother or another woman with a similar name, because the Rivers name is popular in this area. All right, here we are in the vicinity of the camphor tree. Camphor leaves were used to combat coughs, colds, and congestion. The enslaved women and their children may have bonded in this area as they gathered the leaves of the camphor tree. We're going to test the medicinal properties of the camphor leaf by pulling one leaf, ripping it and crushing it into your hand, and then taking a quick whiff. It should smell like Vicks Vapor Rub or Campho-Phenique.
Any leaf?
Just these leaves. This other stuff here, that's the muscadine vine.
It does.
We have Spanish moss, and it's neither Spanish nor is it moss. It's an air plant called an epiphyte that grows on the host tree. It doesn't hurt the host tree, and the enslaved women would take it, clean it by boiling it, and then they would use it for a certain time of the month. They would also, according to lore, stuff it into their shoes, and it would take down blood pressure, and then they would sew it into cloth to make pillows for small kids. I don't recommend you touch it because it's full of mites and chiggers. Now, over here we have the pecan tree, and you can take the shells of the pecan, boil it into a tea, and it would handle inflammation and digestion. And so, this is an area where healing was gathered and applied. Many people ask, did these remedies work? The enslaved women said that they did, and they had to use what was around and what was available to stay well, because a doctor would not be called out here for an enslaved person. Now, that brings us to this side of the house, where we will talk about the facade and a young girl named Leah. house, and as you can see, it's a beautiful home, but it's not a grand southern home. In the days of the McLeods and the enslaved, this would have been the front of the house. It's a Georgian-style house, 4 over 4, 4 rooms on the bottom, 4 rooms on the second floor, and then there's an attic. And the house is facing the south to catch the breeze off of the river, and through strategic opening and closing of the windows and doors, you can catch the breeze. This would have been the front of the house at the arrival of a little girl named Leah. Leah and her parents were marched here from an area 25 miles north of Charleston called McLeodville. And her parents were marched in a coffle, and so they had ropes around their necks, their hands were tied behind their backs, Leah was tied to her mother's hip, and they were all barefoot. And they were marched through swamps, forests, and canals. And when they reached Charleston, they were then brought to Ryan's Mart, which is now the old slave mart over on Chalmers Street. And there they were given paper to clean themselves, but paper doesn't handle dried mud, dried blood, or cracks in your feet. Leah's mom begged, please keep us together, please sell us as a family. Her cries fell on deaf ears. Leah was brought here because of the whims and the needs of the McLeod family. Her parents went down to the Rivers Plantation, which is not too far away, but to a 4 to 7-year-old child, it might as well be 1,000,000 miles away. Leah was brought here because the McLeods needed a living doll or a plaything for their youngest child, Annie. And so, Leah's family life as she knew it was interrupted and infringed upon because Annie needed something to play with. I purposely did not use playmate. Playmate denotes equality, and if you've ever seen children and their toys can turn into whatever they need it to be. And so, if Annie needed a horsey that day, Leah became the horsey. Leah would have been comforted by the women over in the kitchen house. Her formative years would have been handled by the enslaved women here on the plantation, and she would have recognized the language and the culture of the enslaved here. The Gullah language. And this would have been Leah's fate for many years. After the Civil War, she did reunite with her parents down at the Rivers Plantation, and she may have married a young man that her parents had a hand in raising, Mr. Peter Brown. She and Peter Brown lived out their years, and then Leah passed away on February 17, 1936. I'm sure of the date because a year ago, we became in possession of Leah's death certificate.
Wow.
Leah passed away from complications of diabetes, and she also passed away at a time when the narrative of this place didn't match the narrative of how she grew up. Now, about 3 years ago, 80 of Leah's descendants came across the street to the burial grounds, and they gave her the proper send-off that she deserved on February 17, 1936. They clapped, they sang, they prayed, they danced, and then they sent flowers up the river to give her the proper send-off that she deserved. Now, that brings us to the driving force of the plantation, the Sea Island Cotton Patch. It's an area of riches, resistance, and robbery. We're going to meet under this next tree, and we'll discuss the Sea Island Cotton Patch. It's an area of riches, resistance, and robbery. We'll start with the riches. Sea Island cotton is the most luxurious and rare cotton that you can grow. It supersedes Egyptian cotton, and in the days of the enslaved, it brought in 5 times the wealth that regular cotton brought in. The adult enslaved had to pull 100 pounds a day. 600 acres of the plantation was dedicated to the growing of that plant, and it can grow as high as 7.5 to 8 feet tall. This area doesn't look like much now, but this is Sea Island cotton when it's flourishing. It's grown in a mixture of sand, hay, compost, pluff mud, and because there was no breaking the work, sometimes human excrement. In pulling the cotton, it is possible to hurt your hand, and because of what it was grown in, it was possible to trample the stalk. Bloodying the cotton or trampling the stalk were 2 punishable offenses, even if it was an accident, because you're coming against the wealth of the family. You get harvest after harvest after harvest. It's not like regular cotton from September to the next February. And so, this was an area of riches. Then it was an area of resistance, because the enslaver was okay with you planting the cotton, cultivating it, pulling it, but if you were caught with the Sea Island cotton root, it was worse than being caught with a book. Chewing on or ingesting the Sea Island cotton root induces abortion. And if you did that enough, you're coming against the free labor force that the family would receive anytime a baby was born. But women used it as an area of resistance, active resistance, for two schools of thought. School number one, you may have touched me, but I do not have to bury your child if I can get my hand on some of that Sea Island cotton root. School number two, you may have been married to another enslaved person. You and your husband were enslaved, but some women chose freedom for their babies by chewing on the cotton root here. So this was an area of active resistance. And then it was an area of robbery. This will be it. We'll have to go on. All right, this was an area of robbery. Some women could not abort a baby. They brought their babies out here to be monitored. They would rest their babies underneath the shadow of the plant. You could monitor your baby, but you could not stand still and watch. You still had to work. But you could run down the road and check on your baby. And so we have narratives of women who did that. One woman came back and found her baby covered in ants coming out of every orifice on the body. Other women came back, found their babies had been snake bitten. And still other women came back and found their babies dead from the sheer heat out here. So this was an area of robbery. Many children were robbed of their lives just by being brought out here to be monitored. Sea Island cotton is not grown in America anymore. We have to get permission from the USDA just for those two rows, and that's because of the boll weevil. The boll weevil did so much damage that they were not allowed to be grown in America anymore. They were afraid it was going to spread to upland cotton, the regular everyday cotton that we wear. So if there's any inkling of the boll weevil out here, this area has to be pulled up, chopped up, and then burned. The voices of the enslaved in this area went unheard. Their work was never ending, but it was never compensated, but it didn't go unnoticed. There is a silent witness that we will pass as we go into the house, and it's the witness tree. This tree is 400 years old, and it would have been here during the days of the Native Americans. And it's the oldest tree on McLeod Plantation and possibly the oldest tree on James Island. This will take us into the house. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is what she said could be the oldest tree in South Carolina. This would have been here during the slaves.
It started to thunder, so we had to finish the tour on the inside.
Became a member of the Union Navy. I do have the names of those individuals here in my document. I'll pass this around and then I'll move on to the next narrative. Now, that brings us to the narrative of Stephen and Harriet Forrest. Stephen and Harriet Forrest and other enslaved people who were left here had no choice, had no voice, and had a resolute path from birth to the grave. Now, the Confederate Army basically said, we'll protect property, but we will not protect people. Everybody was ordered off the island, but you could leave 2 people on your plantation to make it look like it wasn't abandoned. And so Stephen and Harriet Forrest drew that lot. And they were left to monitor not 37 acres, because that's where we are right now. They were left to monitor 1,700 acres. So 1.5 more miles this way, just past the shopping area across the highway, 1.5 miles this way, which includes the land for the country club, and 2.5 miles this way were monitored by 2 people under the age of 25. Stephen was between 18 and 21 years old. He was married to Harriet in a slave marriage, and Harriet got her time of the month, which did make her a woman, but she was a lot younger. Harriet was actually only 9 years old. And she was married to Stephen, but things were worse for Harriet, because she would have been the only woman here at McLeod and one of few women on the island with the entire Confederate Army. And so many people ask how they fend for themselves, how they take care of themselves. We don't know. We don't have any records of any rations or anything being left for them in the house. We don't have any narratives of them fending off trouble if and when it broke out. And when the Freedmen's Bureau was located here, and O.O. Howard was here, and the freedmen came back and received land grant papers and plots of land, we don't have any records of Stephen and Harriet receiving any kind of compensation for their years of being left out here. To the enslaved and the McLeods, there would have been 23 cabins stretching across the highway just past the shopping area. The cabins would not be white, they would be green. And anywhere from 2 to 14 people could live in a cabin, and they weren't necessarily related. Now, this area became Transition Road because of the transition of people who lived here. They went from the enslaved to the Confederate Army, then to the Union Army, and then to the freedmen. And when the freedmen were forced to give back their land grant papers and plots of land at Bayonet Point, and forced to sign unfair labor contracts, this area became housing to the tenant farmers, and then to, as the debt got worse, to the sharecroppers, and then to their descendants. And so this area was in use all the way up until August of 1990. We're sure of it because of rent receipts. These cabins have no running water. The electricity that's in them is modern by the 1940 standards, and you could rent 4 for under $35 up until August of 1990.
Wow.
Now, that's going to bring us down to cabin number 8 and into the 20th century. Now, that's going to bring us to the well in between cabin number 8 and 9. On top of the well, there's tons of broken items. Broken glass, broken pottery, broken bricks, rusty nails, and coins. If you find any of that kind of stuff here at McLeod Plantation, please leave it where it is. The Gullah Geechee people back then and now mark graves with shells, things from the sea, maybe an item that the deceased used or liked, like the rusty nails, broken glass, broken pottery, broken bricks, and coins. And so, if you find any of this stuff anywhere on McLeod, leave it where it is, because most likely it is a grave marker. First, it brings us to John and Evelyn Gathers. John and Evelyn Gathers were descendants of the enslaved who lived here in the late 1940s. They had a daughter named Julia. Julia lived all of 26 days, and then passed away and was buried behind cabin number 9. Now, we didn't know this at first. Julia's brother, who left here when he was 10, came back 50 years later and told us that Julia was buried behind cabin number 9. And so, it's easiest to see Julia's grave if it dries up out here. You have to go to the left side of the cabin, and right behind it is Julia's grave. But if you don't get to see it, I do have that picture on my phone. Julia's grave is now marked, and periodically we put flowers around it to take some of the sting of having to leave a family member here for decades. Now, that brings us to John and Evelyn's other daughter, Robacina. Transition Road was Robacina's community. She could remember women standing at the well, pumping water and telling stories to the children. She could remember the cabins when they were green and not painted white. She could remember women standing at the well, pumping water, telling stories, and she could also remember going out into the fields and pulling crops with her family. And Transition Road was her community as a little girl, and then when she became an early teenager, a slap in the face came. Because transportation to and from school for children past a certain age in this area was denied. They felt that you were just going to go into the fields and become a crop worker like your family. And so, in order to have a future, a life, and an education, Robacina had to leave McLeod Plantation. She vowed never to return, and she also vowed to never tell anyone she was from James Island, South Carolina, because it was frowned upon at that time. Now, she went to live with an aunt in downtown Charleston. She went to segregated Burke High School, and she later became a nurse. And then she got her assignment, and she was taken back by the address of the assignment because it was for here at McLeod Plantation. She came up here to meet Mr. Willie, her patient, and she had never met him before. This was her first time in her 30s. And she managed to rent several of these cabins, turning them into a mission. She had a place to work on job skills. She had a food and clothing pantry and a church in the house where she grew up. Burial grounds across the street.
What's his name? Dylann Roof or something?
I will never say his name.
Okay.
This is him in front of Transition Road. This is him in front of the big house where we are right now. Now, the members of the church had welcomed him into prayer and Bible study. They asked him, he said he was there to kill black people, and he got off 77 shots. I grew up in Mother Emanuel, and out of those 9 victims, my family and I knew 6 of them.
Wow.
Miss Susie Jackson and my father were on the church trustee board at one time. She was almost 90, and she wasn't a threat to anybody. Reverend Sharonda Singleton had told my mom, be ready. She was coming to commune her and my father. She never made it because that Wednesday happened. Mrs. Cynthia Hurd always greeted me when I went to the John L. Dart Library. She and a family member were in a meeting that Monday, and by Wednesday she was gone. I taught my Reverend Myra Thompson's daughter in Sunday school when I was a teenager. I'm a couple of months older than her son. I could always remember seeing Mrs. Ethel Lance's smile anywhere throughout the church as she ushered. And Reverend Clemente Pinckney was my parents' pastor. At the time of the massacre, I worked in the same school district as Reverend Pinckney's wife. This is communication that the district emailed out the day after the massacre. The 3 people my family and I didn't know very well, Reverend Daniel Simmons, Reverend DePayne Milton Doctor, and Mr. Tywanza Sanders, didn't do anything to warrant being gunned down like that. Mr. Sanders had just graduated, and he lost his life trying to protect and shield his great aunt Susie. So, I tell these stories from the enslaved to their descendants, all the way down to the Mother Emanuel 9, to show that the people here had value. I tell these stories to make sure that the people here are never forgotten. I tell these stories to expose the hate that ate Mr. Willie over a century ago, because it's still in the earth to this day. And I tell these stories to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. So with the time you have left, I encourage you all to go throughout the house. If you can make it down on Transition Road, go into cabins number 8 and 9. If you can make it on this side of the plantation, go to the gin house and the barn. And if you can make it, go across the street to the burial grounds. This place is still alive. And while I've touched on several narratives, there are narratives waiting to be discovered, retold, reshared, and rehearsed, so that this doesn't happen again. With that, thank you. My name is Harriet, and this concludes your tour.
Just the fact that this evil demon chose this location to scout. He literally was on this property scouting potential locations to do the devil's work. He went and walked the same property, same areas we did, but he ended up choosing Mother Emanuel's Baptist Church. But just to know that he was there, he took pictures, he posted this image on his social media, it's just an eerie feeling. All right, y'all, so it started to thunder, so part of the rules, we had to go inside while we was inside, and it's raining now, but we about to go still to the slave quarters so we can get a look at that for y'all. Let's go. Oh yes, these are slave plantations. There was over 20 something. Now there's only 7 left of the original plantations. There they are, aren't they? All right, so this is cabin number 8, what she was talking about. where you can still see, this was caught fire, and you can still see the slaves' footprints, shadow footprints. Right there. You know, this is actual slave quarter. Look at how small this was, and up to 14 people used to be in here. Almost like a burial tomb with ancestral stuff. You can't touch or leave in it, take anything from here with you. But it's a well. And this is cabin number 9. Oh yeah, just look at this. It like probably could be an outhouse right there. But this is the back of us quarters. I'll take y'all around the front, but let's look at the back of it. Here you go, another one. So this used to be 1,700 acres because they sold, and you know, there's yacht clubs and stuff. Now it's left down to, I think they said, 30 something acres. And so it was, 20 something or 100 something, I think she said it was, of these, but now it's only down to 7. Now there's stores and shopping, but back in the 1800s, miles this way, and miles this way. So these are the last of the original 7s, actual slave plantations. How you feel, Meek?
This is the love we have, the passion we have for what we do and why we're here. It's about the history. It's about the feeling of
about never forgetting.
Never forgetting the pain that our ancestors went through, and then how to this day, you heard the latest was like 1990, and just that it's still here. It's still, no words. So I want to tell me what you're feeling, what you're thinking.
Man, it's just crazy. Like, this is our 3rd plantation. And all of them hit different in their own way. But that's why we chose this one, because this one, just like Whitney, is strictly about the slave's perspective. Everything about this plantation is about the slave perspective. And we just walked into actual slave quarters. Like, these were slave, like this used to be one of the churches. Like, you heard about the lady, slave, she ended up going downtown Charleston, becoming a nurse. One of her jobs was to come back to this plantation, and this is, one of the places that she used to take care of the slaves and whoever lived on this property up until 1980. Right here, y'all. This is crazy. So yeah, man, I'll definitely say this is our first plantation in Charleston. We chose this one for a reason, but I would definitely say if you want to look for authentic, historical, soul-touching plantation, come to, I guess it's McLeod Plantation right here in Charleston, man. Yo, we out here in the rain.
Baby.
Give us that Midnight War.
You got to.
That content ain't gonna record itself. Man, we brought y'all Whitney, we brought y'all Lower Valley, now we brought y'all McLeod Plantation, and we did this for y'all. Y'all make sure y'all follow, subscribe, share this out. Let everybody know what happened at this plantation. Not to look back on the past, just remember the past, and so you can move forward properly. We love y'all. Y'all make sure y'all subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, that beep, so you stay notified when we drop new content, guys. We love y'all. Live from Charleston.
Bye, y'all.
Let's go.
Blasphemy against the grace.
Don't get it twisted, y'all.
That's crazy. Blasphemy against the grace. No handouts, now they hating. Icons in the making.